Beneath the streets of Paris, a vault slept behind steel and silence. Inside, more than 5 million euros. And somewhere in that silence, an insider was already writing the first lines of a crime that felt like cinema. The Brink's facility in northern France was built on discipline. Every door required a badge. Every corridor was recorded by cameras. Guards rotated on schedules that had been repeated for years. Trucks carrying cash rolled in and out like clockwork. To the outside world, it looked untouchable, a fortress polished by routine. But in every fortress, routine is a weakness. Because routine means patterns. And patterns can be read, broken, and exploited. Among the dozens of employees, one man knew this better than anyone. He wasn't a director or a guard with a weapon. He was quieter, lower on the chain, but with access that mattered. He touched the system every day, knew which codes changed when, which checks were real and which were just for show. On paper he was ordinary. In reality, he was the fracture line that no one else could see. The building itself became his map. He knew the buzz of each magnetic lock, the blind spots between overlapping cameras, the moments when guards grew tired and careless. Small things invisible to outsiders, but together they formed a picture. The Brink's vault wasn't invincible. It could bleed. Life around him carried on as if nothing was brewing. Drivers finished long night runs, carrying sealed bags of cash. Technicians tapped at monitors, confident the alarms were flawless. Managers counted, recounted, and trusted numbers more than people. All of them believed in the illusion of security. All of them missed the detail that mattered most. The danger wasn't outside the walls. It was inside. It started subtly. At first, just thoughts in his head. Then small hints slipped into conversations with trusted contacts. A word here, a question there. Over coffee, in parking lots, in places where no one would suspect. To anyone else, the exchanges were meaningless. To him and his listeners, they were signals. Soon, whispers became outlines. Outlines became promises. He reached out to people who could turn sketches into action. Men who knew logistics, others who knew force, and a few who knew how to vanish if things went wrong. Each had their own reasons. Unpaid debts, a hunger for money, or simply the thrill of stepping into something that looked impossible. Together, they became a hidden team. By day, they looked like everyone else. Workers, drivers, shadows in traffic. By night, they stepped into another world. One of meetings in back rooms, maps spread out on tables, hushed voices debating risk against reward. Every detail mattered. Every mistake would mean ruin. The contrast defined their lives. Routine on the surface. Secret urgency underneath. Weeks passed like this, until the weight of the plan pressed heavier than the vault they dreamed of cracking. The money wasn't moving. The building hadn't changed. But their perception had. The vault was no longer just a place of work. It was prey. Every great heist begins as a whisper. But whispers only matter when someone dares to turn them into blueprints. The insider had already chosen his moment. He knew the vault not just as steel and cameras, but as a living system with rhythms, weaknesses, and blind spots. Now he needed people who could turn that knowledge into action. He didn't advertise. He didn't recruit loudly. Instead, he tested conversations like traps. A remark about money. A question about risk. Only those who responded with curiosity were invited deeper. By the end of the first month, he had a circle forming around him. Men hardened by debts, experience, and hunger. One of them was a driver, familiar with armored vans, who could move without drawing suspicion. Another had a past in logistics. He knew timing, routes, and how to make cargo vanish from one place and reappear in another. The last piece was muscle. Not reckless thugs, but men who could follow orders, hold their nerve, and understand that silence was survival. Together, they studied the Brink schedule. They mapped the exact hours when vans arrived and when guards grew restless. They noted the shift changes, the thin minutes when one team left their posts and the next hadn't settled in yet. They tracked how often codes were rotated and who controlled them. Nothing was too small. The insider's advantage was precision. He knew how many seconds each lock required, which doors were checked by humans and which only by sensors, and even which guard had the habit of stepping out for a smoke at the wrong time. To most these were habits. To him they were the foundation of a plan. Meetings took place in shadows, garages, closed cafes after hours, apartments with blinds drawn. They used burner phones, avoided routines, and spoke in fragments rather than full sentences. It wasn't friendship holding them together. It was a contract of silence and greed. Each man carried the weight of trust, and the fear that if anyone cracked, the whole plan would collapse before it began. Slowly, the skeleton of the operation emerged. They didn't want a storm of guns and chaos. They wanted control. A takeover so fast and precise that by the time the vault realized what happened, the money would already be gone. For that, they needed timing sharper than a blade. The target was chosen. A night when the vault would be full, the guards at their weakest, and the insider in position to open doors that should have been locked forever. The rest would depend on nerves, speed, and loyalty. Weeks of planning hardened into certainty. Maps were memorized. Escape routes rehearsed. Backup cars positioned. Each man drilled until he could repeat his role without hesitation. The insider looked at his team and knew there would be no second chances. When they moved, it would be all or nothing. And the Brink's vault, a place built on security, was about to face the one thing it could never defend against: its own people. At 3 a.m., the streets were empty. Inside the vault, alarms blinked green, and a team of men moved toward the point of no return. It began with silence. No gunfire. No chaos. Just precision. The insider walked into the building the way he always did. Badge in hand, step steady, face calm. Cameras caught him, guards saw him, but none of them looked twice. To them, he was one of their own. To him, every step felt like a countdown. Behind him, the team waited in staggered positions. The driver parked 2 blocks away, engine idling. 2 others moved through side streets, dressed not like criminals, but like workers who belonged at that hour. Nothing flashy. Nothing suspicious. Blending in was the first layer of armor. Once inside, the insider reached the control point. He swiped, typed, and the first lock clicked open. It wasn't unusual. He had done it countless times before. But this time, he didn't close it behind him. Instead, he gave the smallest signal, a hand brushing his collar. Outside, one of the men started walking. The operation unfolded like rehearsals they had drilled for weeks. At 3:12, a side door opened. At 3:13, 2 figures slipped in, their faces calm but focused, no wasted movements. At 3:15, they were inside the heart of the building. Every second mattered. The insider knew the camera's rotation. They passed through blind spots as if they were invisible. One wrong step, and the alarms would trigger. But their timing was flawless. The vault wasn't just a door. It was layers of security. The team knew this. They didn't try to force anything. They used the insider's codes, the insider's knowledge. When he swiped, systems that should have resisted instead complied. The fortress bent to the touch of one of its own. At 3:19, the vault opened. Steel that was supposed to stand unbreakable shifted aside in seconds. Behind it, stacks of cash, secured, labeled, ready for transport. Millions in neat bundles, waiting like prey. The men worked fast, movements mechanical, no wasted effort. One loaded bags. Another counted, confirming weight and balance. The driver outside started the clock. They had less than 10 minutes before a routine patrol circled near. Every sound inside the vault was magnified. The rustle of plastic, the thud of bundles hitting the floor, the zip of bags closing. It was money stripped of abstraction. Not numbers on a screen but physical weight that could change lives. At 3:26, the last bag was sealed. Over 5 million euros, packed tight, ready to vanish. They didn't celebrate. They didn't even look at each other. They knew the hardest part wasn't stealing the money. It was leaving without a trace. The insider reset what he could, closing doors, re-entering codes, leaving behind a scene that looked untouched. Outside, headlights flashed once. The driver was ready. At 3:30, the men walked out the same way they had come in. Calm, silent, as if they had simply finished another night's shift. No alarms. No resistance. Minutes later, an armored facility worth millions had been emptied under its own roof. And by the time anyone noticed, the money was already gone. Every perfect plan carries a shadow. And in the shadows, cracks always begin to show. For a few days, it looked flawless. No alarms triggered. No guards reported anything unusual. The vault's routines carried on as if nothing had happened. But silence is fragile. And silence, sooner or later, breaks. The first crack came from inside Brink's. During the morning count, a supervisor paused. Numbers didn't align. At first he blamed paperwork. By the second recount, panic set in. Millions were missing, and there was no trace of how or when. The police were called immediately. Detectives arrived, walking through halls that looked untouched. No broken doors, no forced locks, no shattered cameras. It didn't make sense. To the investigators, one thing was clear. Whoever had done this knew the system from the inside. Outside the vault, tension spread through the team. At first there was relief. They had walked away with bags of cash, and no one had stopped them. But relief turned into fear. Because now the investigation was tightening, and the one thing more dangerous than alarms was suspicion. Whispers started among them. One man wanted to lie low, hide his share, disappear for months. Another pushed for quick spending, arguing that sitting on cash was a risk in itself. Their unity began to fray. The insider felt the pressure most. He still had to show up to work, still had to walk the same halls he had betrayed. Every glance from a colleague felt heavier. Every routine question sounded sharper. The walls of the vault now seemed to close in on him, not protect him. Detectives widened their net. They studied schedules, cross-checked employee access, interrogated staff one by one. Each interview was another crack in the team's nerves. Would someone slip? Would someone speak too much? Paranoia grew. One night, in a safe house, voices rose. Accusations flew. Someone had drawn attention, someone had made a mistake. For the first time, the men who had trusted each other in silence now looked at one another with doubt. The money sat heavy in bags. A fortune that should have been freedom. Instead, it became a burden. Every note smelled like risk. Every bundle carried the weight of betrayal waiting to happen. The heist was over. But the real danger had just begun. The vault was empty. The money was gone. And now, every move they made was under the eye of the law. The investigation exploded overnight. French police, financial crime units, even Europol advisors were brought in. The media called it one of the most precise heists in years. But behind the headlines, detectives knew exactly where to look. Inside. The first sweeps were brutal. Every Brink's employee was questioned. Access logs were dissected line by line. Who entered, who exited, at what time. The insider tried to act calm, but he knew the system recorded his every step. He had hidden his tracks, but perfection doesn't exist. Investigators lived for the smallest detail. Meanwhile, the crew outside the vault was unraveling. Each man had a different instinct for survival. One wanted to flee the country immediately, cash in hand. Another insisted they wait, scatter the money, launder it piece by piece. A third warned that sudden disappearances would only attract police attention. Arguments grew sharp. Trust, once their only weapon, was dissolving. The police pressure only made it worse. Surveillance teams followed known associates. Phones clicked with wiretaps. Unmarked cars appeared on corners. The crew felt the net tightening, even before the first arrest. Then came betrayal. It always does. One man, caught with a portion of the cash he couldn't resist touching, faced hours of interrogation. He denied, resisted, but money leaves a trail. Faced with prison, he cracked. And once he talked, suspicion shifted inside the group like a knife. The insider's world shrank. At work, colleagues whispered. Outside, strangers lingered too long near his apartment. He couldn't sleep. Every knock on the door felt like the end. And while paranoia consumed the thieves, investigators pieced the puzzle together. The timing. The access. The knowledge of blind spots no outsider could know. All paths pointed back toward the same conclusion. This heist had been built from within. By now, the millions they had stolen were no longer freedom. They were evidence. They were chains. And the men who once dreamed of disappearing with riches now fought to survive each other. And the police closing in. Every heist ends in silence. Not the silence of victory, but the silence of cells, betrayal, and unfinished dreams. The crackdown came fast. Dawn raids. Kicked in doors. Men dragged out in handcuffs before they could even touch their hidden bags of cash. The police had followed the trail from one loose thread, a careless purchase, a phone call that wasn't burned, a single detail that cracked the whole wall of secrecy. The insider was the centerpiece. Investigators built the case around him. They knew no outsider could have bypassed the Brink's vault so cleanly. He resisted at first, pretending to be just another employee caught in the storm. But evidence spoke louder than denial. Logs, testimony, and surveillance turned his life into a dossier of betrayal. Others fell one by one. The driver, cornered in a safe house with part of the money. The logistics man, arrested after crossing the border with too much cash and not enough answers. Each interrogation cut deeper into what was left of the crew. What began as silence broke down into fragments of confession, each man saving himself at the cost of another. The millions didn't last. Some were seized quickly, still in the original bags. Others disappeared into unknown hands, laundered, hidden, or simply lost. No one ever saw the full sum again. What remained was split between evidence lockers and whispers on the street. For Brinks, the heist was a scar, proof that even fortresses bleed when the threat comes from within. For the thieves, it was the end of the line. Trials followed. Sentences were handed down. Years behind bars became the price for a night that had lasted less than 20 minutes. The insider, once invisible among colleagues, became infamous. Not for brilliance, not for wealth, but for crossing the one line no company ever forgets: betraying from the inside. And as the story closed, one truth remained. 5 million euros had vanished into the night, but the men who took it had lost something far greater: freedom, trust, and the illusion that perfect crimes exist.